The last thing to say is we always start Open Nation. We introduce all of our speakers by asking them to do an icebreaker question. Last year it was, what was the first album that you bought with your own money? I think another year was, what show did you most recently binge watch? But this year we've asked our speakers to tell us what favorite costume that they've ever dressed up in. And most of you were gracious enough to send photos, so that's made it even better. So this is our team at NASA. Carissa and her family are from Big Hero 6. So she's Honey Lemon, her son is Baymax, and what's the husband's name? Fred? Yeah. And if you guys are familiar with the show Community, the mascot for the community college is the human being, the completely inoffensive human being, and that's Ryan. Jeff, of course, is Mario, our favorite video game star. I'm really excited that they are starting us off today because they have got a really great story. They have a really unique way of talking about innovation and metrics when it comes to storytelling and getting other people to be engaged. But they are also like a relentlessly optimistic and positive group, so they're a good one to kick us off. So thank you for joining, guys, and let's get started.
You can't up here alone. Hi. Hi, everybody. All right, let's see if I can get this clicker going. All right. So my name is Carissa Callini, and I am part of the NASA team here today with Ryon Stewart and Jeff Doi. And so we are super excited to share some of our best practices from the last 8 years where we have been doing crowdsourcing. All right, so we are part of NASA's Center of Excellence for Collaborative Innovation, also called COSI, because of course we're at NASA, so we have to have an acronym. And we work not only across NASA to use open innovation tools, but we also work across the federal government. So when we were started back in 2011 when our office was stood up, and at the time the Office of Science, Technology and Policy asked us not only to bring open innovation tools to NASA, but they also asked us to bring it to the rest of the federal government. So we work with places like DHS, the EPA, FDA, I'm blanking on other names, like all of them, to bring open innovation with the public to those organizations. So it's been super exciting. And so if you have questions on that, feel free to connect with us afterwards. But today we're talking about our internal crowd. So NASA at Work is our internal crowdsourcing platform. It's open across the agency to all of our civil servants and contractors. So basically anyone with NASA credentials can log into it. Let's see. And the main goal is to promote idea sharing and knowledge sharing across the agency. So I don't know if you're familiar, but NASA has 10 different centers, and we are spread across the country geographically. And so that can promote a challenge and silos as people are very busy in their work. They tend to close themselves off, and it's hard to find out what's going on with the rest of the agency. And so NASA at Work has become, was the tool, that was one of the primary reasons we started it, was to get people talking, get people innovating, not only on their own problems, but other problems that we were seeing across the agency. Let's see. Oh, and for this presentation, I'm going to talk about challenges, but in IdeaScale speak, that's basically a campaign. So just to equilibrate us there. So like I said, all you need is NASA credentials to participate. So we work with our technical and non-technical teams to turn their problems into challenges. And essentially what that is a mini competition. So there's a challenge brief, like what is the background behind the problem? There's requirements that we're looking for, and there's judging criteria. And at the end, there's an award. So it's exactly like a mini competition. So we have some cool awards that I'll talk about later. There's two ways to participate: as either a challenge owner, so the person that brings us the problem, or you can be a solver. So that's the person that submits their idea to the challenge. And there's no charge to use it, so any NASA team can use this. All it requires is their time. and time has a cost in and of itself, but there's no additional cost. So as long as they're committed to working the challenge and being part of the challenge, that's all we ask of them. So Ryan, Jeff, and I are pretty much the administrators of operations, but we're also the community custodians and really the protectors of the community. And we make sure that anything that's going to go on NASA at Work has a purpose, and it will be used. All the ideas will be evaluated. All the ideas, the ones that are chosen, will either be implemented or be tried for implementation at some point. So everything has to have a meaning that goes on NASA at Work and will hopefully eventually be used. All right. So, in terms of operations, our primary goal is to be a Sherpa. Like, we literally handhold people through the challenge process. And this is the only way it will work, at least at NASA. Because when something is new, it automatically becomes hard. In people's minds, they automatically think it's going to be too hard. I'm not going to have time. This is too new. I can't do this. No one understands this. And so you need people to be a Sherpa, and that is who we are, to hold their hand through the entire process and remove as much friction as possible. So in instances where they run into those roadblocks, you can help them through it, or at least be a person they can talk to about it, right? So be a Sherpa. So that's one of our big best practices. So if you take anything away from today, take away, be a Sherpa. That's our biggest thing. So people come to us in a variety of ways, but it's mainly through the human network. So we give a lot of road shows, we do a lot of presentations, or their friend has tried a NASA Work Challenge, or hey, I heard this other team did this. So the human network is a super powerful tool, especially to get more people involved and in on the challenges that you're doing. And it starts with a one-on-one discussion. It's an easy one-on-one discussion, and that's really where we start to set expectations early. Like, we want to understand what the challenge owning team comes to us, what they really want out of the challenge. What are they hoping to get? And then that's where we also calibrate them on expectation that we expect you to participate in this challenge. This is not something that you just throw online and walk away from. Like, you have to be an active participating member, answering questions, getting on the virtual platform as much as you can. Because we know from our experience that when challenge owners are engaged, either asking questions, answering questions, guiding the conversation, we know that they are going to get more solutions and better solutions as a result. We also have a host of resources that we have available to them on the platform that I think you all saw. All right, so Lasso, and this is not because we are from Texas, but it is true, we are from Texas. We're at Johnson Space Center. So anyway, this is a challenge definition technique that we actually learned from Incentive and that we still use today. And what this does is it just really helps us guide the conversation and really make sure that whatever challenges that we post on NASA at Work meet this criteria and have a purpose. So it just helps us align what the challenge owners are thinking and what we're hoping to get out of the challenge as well. So for this, we start with a challenge worksheet. So we basically ask a lot of questions of our challenge owners. Things like, what is the background? Why is this a problem for you? What are some things that you've tried in the past? What are some of your requirements? Like, does it have to be less than 10 pounds? Or, what is the volume requirement? I mean, these are things that usually come up with our technical challenges. But so we get all that background and we use a worksheet because it helps us all kind of get on the same page and get that background information. And from there, we can determine which of our challenge tools it will be the best fit for. So whether, it may not be NASA at Work, it may be some of our other challenge tools that we have as well. But for the most part, if it's going to be on NASA at Work, it absolutely has to fit this definition. So limited in scope. It has to be, what that means is that it cannot be this super broad problem. It has to be somewhat limited so that one person can answer the question by themselves. It has to be in less than 40 hours. So the way that we have NASA at Work set up right now is we try to limit people's participation to around an hour, and that's our own thing that we have done. So I'm not suggesting that you do that as well, but that is our own requirement. But basically, someone has to be able to answer the question within an hour. It has to be actionable so that all the ideas that come out of the challenge, the challenge owning team can take those ideas and actually do something with them. It has to be specific enough where you don't need a team of 40 people to answer the question. One person with their own knowledge can answer it. And it has to be supported and owned, meaning that management is on board with running a challenge and that everyone thinks this is a great idea and that they are the true owners of the problem. So there are people that love to solve other people's problems. We do not allow that on NASA at Work. You have to be the true owner of the problem so that when the community responds to the call and gives you their great ideas, you can actually take those ideas and do something with them. So this is our criteria. This has worked really well for us over the past several years. And a lot of times when we talk to our challenge owners about their problems, their whole problem may not be challengeable. Not everything is a great fit for a challenge. And we recognize that, and I'm sure you have as well. But there may be a piece, right, of the problem that is great for a challenge, is a great ideation stepping point. And so a lot of times we walk through that process as well with our challenge owners, like what is a good fit, what isn't a good fit, and then go from there. All right, so challenge timeline. So this is our typical challenge timeline. So it takes about 2 months, right, to run a challenge from beginning to end. And it starts with that engagement piece. So the engagement piece, like I said, having that initial discussion with the challenge owner, it may start with, like, oh yeah, I'm all in, we're gonna do this. And you're thinking, okay, by tomorrow we're gonna launch this challenge. No, it'll be like a year later. But keeping that person engaged and continually following up with them is key to get it across and cross the finish line all the way to an actual challenge. So after the engagement piece and the whole develop the challenge phase, we work with them on developing the challenge, turning their problem again into challenge with requirements and judging criteria and all that good stuff. At the same time, in parallel, we make sure that we start the things on IdeaScale. So we set up the workflow, we start the draft, and so that is all in that initial development piece. And then from there, we open the challenge for 4 to 6 weeks. And we have seen this as a best practice because it keeps, that cadence isn't so much that people are being bombarded all the time, constantly with new things, but it keeps it fresh enough that people keep coming back. So you want the community engaged with new things, but you don't want to overwhelm them with too much. And I don't know about you guys, but where we work, people are like, I can't handle yet another email. So we also try to limit the number of communications, although email is is honestly, sadly, the best way to communicate with people to help get their eyes on it. But again, we try to only release one every week, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, just so they don't start like glazing their eyes over and not really paying attention to our emails anymore. So that's one of our best practices. Let's see. We award up to 2 winners at the end, and this has been something that's kind of evolved over time as well. We used to, in the very beginning, very beginning, we used to just let the challenge owners pick as many award winners as they wanted, and that was kind of not that great because they would, it would range from like 1 to 10, and so it's like, okay, So we decided that we really needed to do up to 2 winners because it was a nice balance of awarding really great ideas, but not awarding too many people to where it didn't mean anything anymore. And as well, because there's also prizes and awards associated with it, it helped with that work as well. So that is something that we have done over time, and with the option to not award. So we always tell our challenge owners, like, if you don't see something here that meets any of your criteria, feel free to not award. And especially if they're new, that kind of takes a lot of the stress and pressure off of them to like make a decision. But whenever possible, we encourage them to award when they can. All right, so awards. So this is the fun part. So we give our NASA at Work winners a NASA at Work certificate and innovator pin, like that we're all wearing today. And our certificates are signed by our program, our Challenges and Prizes program executive. And let's see what else. And our award system is a tiered system where as you win more NASA at Work challenges, you unlock cooler prizes. And these are things like NASA or astronaut autographs, cool NASA experiences, depending on what center you're at. It might be cooler than other centers. But things that have items that are flown in space. So these are very unique to our community. We also, so our team manages all the awards as well, and part of that is we notify the winners and their management of the challenge win, and that's really great because we have seen we do a lot of research with Harvard on all of our crowdsourcing efforts, but specifically for NASA at Work, we worked with the Harvard team to really try to understand what was engaging people to keep coming back. Like why were they participating at NASA at Work? What were some of the things that they were? Was it the mission? Was it being part of this larger process? What was it that was getting them back? And the number one thing that was statistically significant was the fact that their management recognized them and got that recognition. So managerial recognition was huge. And so we not only do that for our solvers, but we also do it for our challenge owners, because honestly, they are the true heroes of this whole thing. So, NASA is 60,000 people that love to solve problems, not 60,000 people that like to say, hey, I have a problem, can you help me? Right? And so we are trying to change that culture, but recognizing our challenge owners as, hey, these guys were willing to try something new, oftentimes, do something out of the box and ask for help on their problem to move their project forward, that recognition has gone a long way. And so that's something that we are very, very passionate about and like to do that. Let's see. And because we have prizes, let's see. Awards. Oh, and the other thing I was going to say, so all our awards are non-monetary because we are a mixed workforce of contractors and civil servants. And so we have found that non-monetary awards works best for us. And we actually crowdsourced all these awards. We asked the community, the NASA at Work community, hey, what would you guys like to see? And I mean, there were things like, oh, a day off, free parking, and like a better parking spot. But it was stuff that we had to be able to do across all 10 centers. And so the things that we ended up with were like the astronaut autographs. I mean, that's still really cool, right? and some of these other things. So that was another thing. So if you don't have an award system, consider crowdsourcing that from your group. All right, so I am quickly trying to get through the rest of this. All right, so at the end of the challenge, we have a quick 30-minute chat with our challenge owners just to hear like what came of the challenge. What did the ideas mean to them, and what kind of impact did it bring to their project? And when we say impact, what we mean is how far did it move their project forward? And we try to quantify that as best we can, again, because we're NASA and we love metrics. And so we try to quantify that as best we can, asking them, okay, if you hadn't run this NASA at Work challenge, what other method would you have used, and how long would that have taken? So most of the time it's things like, well, we would have had 2 people working on it for 6 months, or 3 people working on it over the course of the next 2 years to get to the same place. So we're really trying to do the best we can comparing apples to apples, but really understanding the impact of what the challenge meant to the challenge owners. And this is also the time where we share lessons learned. And after a year, we like to follow up with our challenge owners and just see where the ideas are. Like, were they able to move them forward? Did they try them and then it just didn't work? I mean, that's still a great result, right? They gave them something to try, whether or not it worked out or not. And sometimes it's not even just a year. It's 1 to 2 or 3 years later, especially for some things that seem like bigger wins, where we continually follow up so that we can continually add to the story of what this challenge has meant to these challenge owners and the impact in the long run. So there are 1.5, so technically, even though there's 3 of us here, we technically only have 1.5 people managing this entire program, which sounds crazy. But somehow we managed to do it. So there's like piece parts of a lot of us that work on a lot of other things. But there's 1.5 people working this full time, working with challenge owners, curating the community, and also managing the entire award system. So with that, I'm going to switch it over.
All right, thanks. Thank you. I just got here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm just kidding. Chris is great. All right, cool. I'll try to be quick. So one of the things that we found that has been a huge part of our job is showing the value of open innovation, particularly crowdsourcing. So it's not traditional. We all know that. That's why we're here. And most people that we talk to really don't know who we are, don't know what we're doing, don't know what crowdsourcing is. And so educating them has been a huge part of getting buy-in. And the story that we're able to tell, the better the story is, the more likely we're to get that buy-in, the more likely they use tools, the more likely they're saving NASA money, saving all of our taxpayer money. And so that's good. That's what we try to do, is tell a really good story, but it's difficult to do. What we found, though, is the punchline to that story is our metrics. And so capturing lots of really good relevant data about things that we think our stakeholders and our potential challenge owners are going to care about, we found that that really gets to the point of what we need to do. And I'm going to talk a little more about the kind of specific metrics later, but some of our really big ones are like what's been our cost savings, what percentage of our challenges have been successful, what percentage of people like want to come back, and we'll talk a little bit more later. And if you have any more questions specifically on metrics and things, then again, come talk to us afterwards. All right, so the next few slides are some examples of case studies that we present to potential challenge owners. So like Carissa mentioned, a lot of what we do is educating via roadshows. So like, hey, you guys have a group meeting? Cool, we're gonna come talk about it. But what we do and explain why we can help benefit you and help solve your problems. And so this is just an example of, these next few are some examples of some of the case studies that we present. An interesting thing, and I think it'll be unique for a lot of you, because a lot of you are just developing your platforms, you're new, and so you can't rely on your past successes. Like we have 8 years of successes for NASA at work, and so it's pretty easy to find good ones. There are a lot of really good industry examples that you can find. I mean, if you go on different crowdsourcing platforms, if you go to IdeaScale's website, I'm sure you're going to find lots of good, relevant case studies. And that's what's so cool about crowdsourcing, is that it is successful. It's proven. And when you have real data to back that up, people like engineers like myself, I'm an aerospace engineer, I love data. And it absolutely convinced me when I came to this job and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, we've saved 90+% on average. You know, our cost savings is 80+%, and we're on average it's around 45% cost savings. I'm like, that's ridiculous. How are you guys doing that? I'm not even a business person. I understand that that is significant. And so I was bought in right away. And so case studies like this are really important. Once you have your own, recommend using those, but when you don't have them, then you use industry examples. Okay, so let me go through this few specific ones real quick, just so you can kind of get a feeling for how we talk to the folks that we're presenting to. So Robert Peterzik, he's from JSC, he's Human Health and Performance Director. So are we, even though we don't really fit in that well. So he was looking for improved solutions for measuring urine volume microgravity. Probably the same kind of problems you guys have at, right? And so he was ready to spend over $1 million, multiple years of development trying to figure this out. This is the kind of thing that happens. What's really cool about working in NASA, by the way, is basically everything we do, humans have never done before. So it's pretty interesting. Military has to deal with a lot of the same kind of things, only they get a lot more money to do that. And so, fortunately, he decided, hey, before I go do all this development, let me see what my internal crowd knows. Let's see what NASA knows about this. And so he ran a NASA at Work challenge. It was on the order of 4 to 6 weeks, like our other ones. And he ended up finding a working prototype that he could use, basically plug and play, and it was 300 yards away from his desk. So there aren't just silos, within our 10 centers. You would expect at Langley or at JPL or JSC and all the different places that they're going to be kind of operating and not sharing information well. This is a guy who had to go across the quad to get this information and was able to get it virtually through NASA at Work and was able to save millions of dollars in multiple years of development just because it was already there. He just didn't know about it. So very similar story, Camilla Shaw from Stennis Space Center. So she was trying to better predict high safety risk conditions using a lot of data that they had. already, and so she was thinking, like this is like a multi-million dollar kind of deal, found out about our group and was actually about to run machine learning, probably through Topcoder, but we would have to figure that out. But machine learning type challenge through some of our other vendor platforms that aren't on our internal IdeaScale, and she was ready to do that. Probably going to spend 100,000 plus on it. And before she ran it, we convinced her, let's see what NASA knows about it first. It's free for us. Let's see what we know. Turns out headquarters had already spent $5 million developing this, and she just didn't know about it. And so again, it was the same thing. It's like, oh, we already have the answer. And so these knowledge connections are just so great because we're all in silos all the time. Everybody's in silos at your work. I know wherever you are, it's a problem everybody has to deal with. And it's such a strong story to tell because if you tell anyone that you work with, oh, we're trying to break through silos, they're like, yeah, you can't do that. But then when you have a story like this, like, yes, we did. Camilla saved $5 million. When did you save $5 million, And so, yeah, NASA at Work Challenge, which was free, by the way. She probably spent less than 20 hours supporting this whole thing. And if you can make $5 million in 20 hours, then I think you're doing all right. All right, so one other example here. So Tracey Gill from KSC, he was working on a project to sanitize fresh produce being grown on the International Space Station. Some of you might not know, but we've been growing produce on the International Space Station for a little while. The International Space Station is an orbiting laboratory, 250 miles up, traveling 17,500 miles per hour. Pretty darn fast. And so we have 6 astronauts on board quite frequently, and they're growing produce so that they can kind of figure out when we go to deep space, so we go to Moon, Mars, with long trips, we need to be able to eat. Humans do that for whatever reason. And funny thing is they had produce up there, but the astronauts couldn't eat it because we didn't think first how to sanitize the produce. And we always wash the produce before we, even on Earth, not alone, let alone when you're in space. So he decided to go to NASA work to figure out, NASA, do you have any good ideas for this? And found 2 practical solutions, saving about $120,000. Funny thing though, one of those 2 solutions was from one of his coworkers. There was a silo between him and his coworker. And this is someone he was already working with on a different project, but they didn't know that they could share this knowledge about, they didn't know they were working on this kind of thing. And so it's like, geez, these silos are like the person sitting next to you. How does this happen? And they re-met each other on NASA at Work. And so these are just a few examples. We have lots of these. We could go all day, and I do this at my office, but we could do this all day about, and these are just NASA at Work examples. We have ones on the other platform as well. Those 3 were technical examples. So this is also, we can take advantage of non-technical things on the platform as well. Okay, thank you. And so, real quick, this actually ended up being the challenge that we had that had the most interaction out of all of our challenges, and it was non-technical. You wouldn't expect a graphics challenge to be the one that was so exciting. And so, in reflecting back upon it, we were thinking like, why was this so good? And what is the subject matter? So many of you probably don't know what the Gateway program is. The Gateway program is a huge part of us getting back to the Moon and Mars, getting boots on the Moon by 2024, which is what we've been tasked to do. And it's basically a space station that orbits the Moon. It's in between Earth and the Moon, and allows us to transit to the lunar surface. So it is the kind of thing that NASA people go to work to NASA for. When we go there, we want to solve these kinds of problems. But I have a feeling it's pretty similar to the places you work. A lot of your job, maybe all of your job, doesn't reach the mission for which you went there for. We have accountants, we have lawyers, we have administrative staff, we have managers, and they probably don't feel like they're contributing to these cool missions very often. So when you can tie your challenges to a cool mission that your network cares about, all of a sudden you get 3,000 votes. We do not get 3,000 votes normally. We're happy to get 50 votes or something like that. And so it was very clear that anytime we can, we should tie the titles, tie the logos, the things that are going to jump out at people to the missions that they care about. Highly recommend you do that. Okay, real quick, talking specific metrics. So these are just some of the examples that we capture and share. Our crowd size, how many challenges we've done, percent that result in positive outcome. We call positive outcome anything that's at least incremental advancements in the solution, percentage of solutions that have been implemented or planned, percentage of challenges which have given us cost savings, that total cost savings. These are really good numbers to be able to tell. In fact, we find that just knowing these off the top of your head is really important because we're not, a lot of our evangelism isn't just in presentations, it's in the lunch line or whatever else we're doing. I'm talking to somebody and inevitably like, oh, what do you do? Where are you at now? And when I talk about my group, when I'm like, oh yeah, did you know that we're in COSI? Oh yeah, we do crowdsourcing. Oh yeah, you haven't heard about us? Yeah, we've saved projects like 90+%. We're successful 90% of the time, 86% of the time we're saving the money. And like, no, I didn't know about that. And so having these kinds of things memorized is very important, and you get them memorized by thinking about them all the time, by taking them all the time. So we think about metrics a lot. Really quickly, this is Salesforce. It just happens to be one of the platforms that we use to maintain all of this data. When you have hundreds of campaigns like we do, there's a lot of data to maintain. And so the ability to capture all that data, to manipulate it as required, and then view it is extremely important. If you can't do those things, then why even capture it in the first place? We actually use Google Sheets or Excel effectively to manipulate and view this data. Whatever platforms you use whatever you want, but recognize that your ability to view and manipulate the data is just as important part of the storytelling process as capturing it in the first place. Okay, so really quickly, I'm just going to go through some different ways that we show the metrics that we have. We have probably 50, 100 charts that are different that are depending on who our audience is. So depending on who your audience is, you want to craft your story. And what metrics you use and how you display them will completely depend on who you're talking to. You're talking to management, you're talking to an engineer, you're talking to a scientist, et cetera. So this is just an example of somebody maybe doesn't care a lot about cost savings. Notice nowhere do we put cost savings on here. We put what is the success rate, how many people would use it again, how many challenges have we done. This is for maybe for somebody who needs to be convinced that this is likely to be a success. Maybe it's their first time and they're a little iffy about it, which everybody is. Okay, so this is a good chart that gets really to the point. This is all of our challenges that went away for some reason. And how many were successful, how many have we done, what's your cost savings? It's in pretty much every presentation we do. Something like this is really good to show the breadth and depth of what we can do. We do a lot of different type of work. Something here is hopefully registering with someone say, oh, I work in software and apps. Oh, I could use them. And so you're trying to find something that they might recognize as familiar, and if they can do that, then they're more likely to use us. Back to Carissa.
That's right. All right, thanks, Ryan. So just to summarize some of our best practices, so key takeaway, be a Sherpa. Hold people's hands through this process, especially if it is new to your organization. That is the number one reason why we are successful, is that we are all Sherpas within our team, and we hold people's hand through the process and work them through it. Choose the right problems. Be kind of picky. If it's not a good fit, tell them it's not a good fit, or change it to make it a good fit. So be careful about the problems you choose. Use a challenge worksheet or something like it to help you facilitate these conversations. It's a great tool in capturing information and learning more about the background and the problem. Find the right incentives for your community, especially if you're doing non-monetary awards. Like, what would people be excited about? Why would they keep participating? Follow up after the challenge. Really understand what the impact is, and if you can, quantify it, because that is part of the metrics that will keep telling your story over and over and over. Speaking of metrics, capture lots of them, because you never know how you're going to use them later. So the more that you have, use them to speak to stakeholders, and then evolve your story. Ryan talked about our metrics constantly evolving. Our team has constantly evolved over the past 8 years. Even within the last year that Ryan's been here, we've evolved our processes. So continually learning, continually changing practices for the better and making things more efficient will also make your group successful as well. So thank you guys so much for your time today, and then please connect with us if you have any questions.